Thank you so much for joining us today for our December 21st, 2023 GSPAC meeting. I know it's been a while since we last met, but we're excited to get the ball rolling on all things GSPAC. My name is Marina Delajanis. I serve as the Deputy Director of the Lake County Water Resources Department and the lead for our Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan Advisory Committee. We are going to go ahead and get started just for note-taking purposes. For our friends on Zoom, if you don't mind going ahead and in the chat, putting your name, your affiliation, especially if you're a GSPAC member, and then that way we can capture those properly in our minutes. All right, we're going to go. And if you're following on to the agenda, we are on agenda item 1.1, roll call of current GSPAC members and acknowledgement of some of our open seats that we have. So David Wise with Bella Vista Farming Company. I don't believe he is on. I know he is unable to make it. Okay. Pat Scully, Scully Packing Company. Also unable to make it. Sarah Ryan with Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians.
Yeah, I'm on.
Awesome.
Hi.
Sarah, hi. Scott Hornick with Special Districts. There you are, Scott. Thank you for joining us. Awesome. Valerie Nixon with Lake County Land Trust. And I believe Valerie will be joining us when she can. She might be a little late. All right. Rebecca Harper with Lake County Farm Bureau. I don't see Rebecca on the call. And Marina Delajanis, Lake County Watershed Protection District. Hi, everyone. I'm here. And we do have vacant seats. We'll be chatting about these vacant seats later on in the agenda, but we currently have an open environmental user seat, 2 private user seats open, 1 being a domestic well owner. We also have 2 underrepresented user seats open. All right, so reviewing item 2 for agenda item 2, April 6, 2023 minutes. I don't believe we have a quorum right now, so I'm going to hang tight on seeking approval from the advisory committee. But did folks have an ability to look at those minutes? And if there's any questions from the GSPAC, I'm going to hang tight and open up those questions for the GSPAC right now. And Valerie just joined us. Hi, Val.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
You are totally fine. We are on agenda item 2, reviewing and approving minutes from April 6, 2023.
Okay.
And we do have a quorum now that you're here. So if there's no questions or comments from the advisory committee on the April minutes, are there any questions or comments from members of the public on those minutes? And those minutes can be found online. I see nothing in the meeting chat. There's no comments or questions in the conference room, Mitchell.
No questions here.
All right, thank you. Hearing no questions or comments from any advisory committee members and no members of the public, do I have a motion to approve the April 6, 2023 minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Val. And do I have a second?
Second.
All right, that was Scott Hornick. Thank you, Scott. And as a reminder, all of our meeting materials for our GSPAC recordings, presentations are on our Big Valley GSPAC website under Lake County Water Resources. I have a link at the end of this presentation if you want to get caught up, recall what we've done in the past year or so as we move forward to the next year. And we have Rebecca Harper, also a GSPAC member, joining us. So she's connecting to audio, but thank you for joining us, Rebecca. All right. All right, so we're moving on to agenda item 3, Big Valley groundwater updates. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Program Coordinator Mitchell Breedlove to do an overview of current groundwater conditions and drought-related information.
Hello, everyone. Happy afternoon. I hope you have some great holidays coming up here pretty soon. So as you can see on our screen now that Marina is sharing, I have the levels from, what is that, June all the way until November. We have done readings for December. I was unable to get those in there via this time. That will be at our next time. Our average depth overall for the basin currently is about 19 feet, and that has gone up about 2 feet. So we're at about 17 feet here in December. And with the given rains the past few weeks, it should be even higher. That's the biggest update on that currently. So we can go ahead and move on to the next item.
Before we do that, Mitchell, are there any questions on the current groundwater conditions?
Is that considered a good depth?
This is about average for our region. That is a good depth. Of course, last year at this time, we had quite a bit of rain, so it was higher. But this is the general average depth of our basin.
Any other questions for Mitchell as it relates to our current groundwater conditions? Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if he could explain the differences in the average depth. Like I'm seeing the well that is, there's a few wells that have an average depth of, of below 15 feet. And then there's a few wells that are above 25 feet. And in terms of the monitoring that you all do, and I'm seeing that all of these wells, you have a monthly static level reading. Are there some additional characterizations of each wells that you're starting to put together and understand? And it's sort of related to Val's question of, is this normal? What other types of information can you share about these wells that have a more shallow average depth versus the ones that have a larger average depth?
Yeah, I can attempt to answer that question. Some of these deeper wells, they may have been pumping during the harvest season. So they may not have been pumping at that time, but that could be one of the reasons. We are currently seeking to get better well completion reports, and a conversation that's coming up here in the next few agendas is about the information order. We absolutely want to work more with State Water Resource Control Board to have better information on these wells, their actual depths, so on and so forth. We currently only have limited information.
And then just
You
to,
have current limited information even about these wells that are part of your program?
We have some information on these. Not all of them have given well completion reports, as many of them may have been installed prior to that being required here within the county and the state. So we work with what we have currently, and I would have to get back to you on that answer. I can dive into each of these, but these are our monthly wells that we monitor every month.
Scott Hornig, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, just curious, this one jumps out at me, this ID, the one in the center of the map, 13N09W, goes on 8/7/25, 9/20 goes to 3.7. 1 week later, 2 weeks later, it's back to 32.6. Seems odd.
That may be a typo on my part. I would have to look into that.
So I am going to say, Mitchell, go ahead. Once you put in the data that was collected for December, prepare an updated map showing the groundwater conditions and send that out to the advisory committee and the listserv. Another comment that that I will make is that we are in the process of preparing our annual report for water year 2023. So based off of the annual report and the data collection that we were able to collect and analyze last year, we're going to be able to strengthen that. So Sarah, hopefully, again, with the IO again, some other opportunities that Mitchell discussed as it relates to strengthening more routine and reoccurring data collection. This is monthly data, and we acknowledge from the start that that is not giving us the best picture as possible, along with trying to collect those well completion reports for these private wells that we do monitor on a monthly basis. Between the last annual report, this current annual report, we will be preparing and then again, getting a stronger understanding from the information order and those well completion reports, we're going to be able to strengthen our understanding of the current conditions and report back out to the team. Team being advisory committee. Any other questions as it relates to the current groundwater conditions? I see something in the chat. Okay, all right. Moving on. I'm going to let Mitchell talk about our Big Valley FSS and TSS. As a reminder, FSS is our Big Valley Facilitation Support Services that we receive through Stantec. And then our TSS is our Technical Support Services as well. And we do have Quinn Little in the Zoom room. If you don't mind waving, there we go. Quinn, please feel free to elaborate, especially as it relates to item 3.3, the TSS. So go ahead and take it away, Mitchell.
All right. A quick update for the FSS that is with our partners over at Stantec. And we previously had support from them with FSS assisting with putting on these committee meetings, as well as other tasks, a lot of general outreach. And we will be continuing that contract. It will be extended, and we are looking to begin that again in Q1 of 2024. So within our next meeting that we hold as the GSPAC, we will be back in services with the FSS. As far as our TSS update, you guys have seen this a number of times. On the left, we have our proposed wells and drilling locations for monitoring wells from DWR. This was implemented into our GSP. And on the right, we do have 2 locations that have been confirmed, and we are moving forward. So the first one up on the right-hand side is Kelsey Creek site, and that is on our eastern side of our Kelsey Creek detention structure. This will assist us in not only understanding groundwater surface water interaction, but just a great overall what's going on in the basin. And this one's great because it's within a lot of agricultural area. We are currently working to we've started to get a permanent easement because that access to that property is through a private property. So the county, as the GSA is working to get that going, that will go before the board, hopefully near the end of January, as well as the contract with DWR. And our other one here is at Argonaut and Highway 29. And that is it's a Caltrans right-of-way parcel, but they have no plans to ever use that. And DWR is working hand in hand with them to install the monitoring well there. And we are currently finishing up our application for an encroachment on that parcel. And those are anticipated to begin end of January is when we're looking at that. And I know that Quinn is here, that they do have some availability to drill relatively quickly. So as soon as we get that done, we will be good. And as far as the acronyms, FSS is the Facilitation Support Services, and the TSS is the Technical Support Services. Quinn, do you have anything to add?
No, that was a pretty good summary, I'd say. I'm thinking if there's anything that got left out of that. The only thing I'll say as far as the Kelsey Creek site and drilling early is that site has a lot of soft earth that the big heavy drill rig isn't going to be able to be on if we're getting a lot of rain. So that site won't be all weather. So that might affect whether or not we can get out to Lake County and drill in the early months when, if it's like last year, that's going to be pretty hard to drill in that kind of weather. But if we end up with a dry year, we can drill. But that's about it.
Thank you. If there's any questions, feel free to ask. I can answer to the best of my ability.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I apologize if, I'm sure this has been discussed before, but my brain is not holding on to this information. With these wells that are going in, these DWR wells that are going in, are you guys going to be installing sonic water level indicators with telemetry or, you know, some sort of downloadability, where, like, how often is it going to be reading information if you are installing that, or is this more of a water quality monitoring, or both?
I will go ahead and let Quinn answer that. I believe it is every 15-minute intervals.
Hour.
1 hour.
Our
Okay.
plan is to install telemeter groundwater level transducers in these. Groundwater quality at this point is going to be taken a lot less regularly, but we do have plans to try to implement better groundwater quality monitoring. Primarily, these are going to be multi-completion wells that are designed to measure groundwater levels, and they should measure hourly. And the goal on these ones is going to be to install a cellular telemeter receiver. And that's going to broadcast this data, and we should get an average daily mean of the data the following day. So once this is up and running, and once this is in, there's going to be a website you can go to. Right now, it's CNRA Open Data. That's California Natural Resources Agency Open Data. It's a little convoluted. It might be a special meeting if I have to go through and walk through the process of accessing that data as it is now, but we are working on getting that in a more accessible database like California Groundwater Live or the monitoring network module on the Sigma portal.
Cool. And so these are DWR wells or county wells that are going to be maintained for monitoring purposes. And what are their depths going to be again, approximately?
Total depth is right now planned to be around 400 feet for these two wells. That might change depending on if we hit solid bedrock as we're drilling. The drill can't really go through that very easily, so that's usually where we stop, is once we're out of the sedimentary and volcanic layers. As for the individual depths of the multi-completion screen wells, we can approximate, we want to have a shallow one ready for any interconnected surface water monitoring, but other than that, we don't know until after we've drilled and we've looked at the cuttings that we pull out of the drill and log those samples. And we also run geophysical logs through these boreholes. And that kind of gives us an idea of where we have coarse grained rock material that could hold water. And that's usually where we decide to put our screens.
Okay, I got a little confused. 400 feet, but that's, it might be a lot more shallow depending on the boring.
Yeah, we say 400 feet, and in all likelihood, based on what I know of the geology of this basin, it's going to be around 400 feet. As for why we might go shallower, it's just if we hit bedrock, which I doubt. What we do, we put multiple different wells. This is a nested well, so we're going to have one deep, and it's going to be screened down as deep as we can. And then we're going to go ahead and put in a bentonite layer in the well, which is a clay, and it kind of separates each layer of the well. So we can have effectively 4 different monitoring wells with 4 different depths in one borehole.
Sarah, did that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. I mean, if one of the things that these wells are supposed to do is to potentially understand groundwater, surface water interconnectedness, then a really deep well is not necessarily a good idea, I think. But if you're putting in, if it could potentially have 4 different wells, because if it's multiple nested wells, that sounds a lot more useful. What would be the most, well, I guess you wouldn't know until you do the boring, what would be the most shallow part?
As shallow as we can in order to correctly evaluate interconnected surface waters. That's gonna depend a little bit. We do have a minimum depth we have to screen at, just based on if you have a really, really shallow well that's only a few feet, there's a lot more potential for contaminants to get inside the well and inside the aquifer itself. So we have certain depth requirements, but we are gonna try and go as shallow as possible, as we think we need to go, as deep, as shallow as we can go to correctly evaluate this. And that shallow completion is going to be isolated and separate from anything going on deeper. So, you know, if we have a really productive deep aquifer, it's not going to affect our groundwater level measurements of the shallow aquifers.
Great, thank you, Quinn. And I think that would be beneficial, maybe early in the year, one of our first meetings in 2024, to have you go through the data.cnra and kind of do a deeper dive into that. And of course, this will be a standing agenda item until the wells are drilled. So if questions do come up, even before the next meeting, go ahead and just reach out to us at Water Resources, or we also have Quinn's contact information on the last slide as well. So be sure to reach out to us if you have any questions, and we can answer when appropriate. But things are moving along, so we're really excited to get these wells drilled. Any additional questions on that front? No? Awesome. Moving forward. So we do have a guest speaker today. We have John Murphy. I believe folks, for the most part, know John. We've seen his face a few times. So thank you, John, for joining us. John is from the State Water Resource Control Board. John, do you have slides that you're going to share?
I do, yeah. Can you give me permission or?
Absolutely, I can. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let
Should do it.
you should be able to. Perfect. All right. Thank you, John. We are going to move to item 4, Clear Lake Hitch, presentation of State Water Resource Control Board Information Order Regulations.
All right, you see my presentation okay so far?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, thanks everyone. Yeah, I'm John Murphy. I'm with the State Water Board's Division of Water Rights. I have been involved with work in the Clear Lake and Lake County area for the past year now, working on issues related to the Clear Lake hitch. I'm guessing most on this call are pretty familiar with the hitch issue and the declining population. So I won't go too much into that work, but I'm going to focus on what the Water Board has been doing on this project, specifically as it relates to an emergency regulation that was just adopted by our board a couple weeks ago. So I'll give a little overview of the emergency regulation. These are recycled slides from previous presentations, mostly. So some of you have probably seen these slides a few times now. My apologies for that. But over the next 10-15 minutes here, I'll just give a brief overview of the emergency regulation, what it authorizes, an information order that will be coming out in January, February, and information that will be in that, and how to comply, and some more background on that, and then happy to take any questions. So as I said, I've been working on this project for a little over a year now. And so with the State Water Board, our main focus is on focusing on water quality throughout the state, but also more importantly with the Division of Water Rights where I work, we're more focused on water quantity. Typically that's with surface water quantity, and we have permitting authority. So we issue permits related to appropriations of water, uses of water, or oversee things like riparian right claims or pre-1914 claims, which are other water rights. So typically we don't have much involvement with groundwater or regulatory authority over groundwater. However, we do have public trust authority. And so in the case of the Clear Lake Hitch, this is a public trust resource, and therefore we are able to take a little bit of a closer look to groundwater use than we typically do as part of the Division of Water Rights anyway. So looking at the declining hitch population and trying to identify reasons for the hitch decline and ways to protect the hitch and sustainably manage water resources in the Lake County or Clear Lake watershed moving forward, we looked at available data and some data that we collected over the past year. And what we're seeing, this being the Groundwater Sustainability Plan Action Committee or Advisory Committee, we are pretty confident that groundwater pumping has some sort of impact on surface water availability or creek flows. However, we can't definitively say what the magnitude of that impact is, or what the timing of that impact is, or when that impact occurs, or how long it persists. So we have some fairly significant data gaps that we need to address. And I think a lot of these are the same data gaps or challenges that the GSP has acknowledged. So I think a lot of the work we're trying to collect with our effort is going to also help the GSP. So some data challenges, there's quite a few, but these are the main ones. They include well locations. We don't know where a lot of the wells are in the valley or in the basin. We also see, I know Sarah, you asked a question about groundwater level fluctuations. We're using data from the Lake County Monitoring Network to evaluate groundwater level fluctuations. And we do see they can be substantial. You know, we see 30 to 70 feet changes in groundwater elevations throughout the year from wet year to dry year. So they can be substantial. However, we don't really know or have a good understanding of the exact groundwater surface water interconnectivity or relationship. So that's a data gap, and that's also a data gap, significant data gap identified in the GSP. And we also kind of lack a lot of subsurface characterization, pump test data, hydrogeologic parameters that help us better understand groundwater surface water interaction. So because of these challenges and the Hitch emergency, the governor issued an executive order back in March. And the executive order did acknowledge that the drought conditions were subsiding. However, there is need in some areas of the state for continued investigation and regulatory actions. So when it comes to Clear Lake was called out specifically in this executive order, and it asked government agencies to look into longer-term actions necessary to protect the Hitch, to evaluate minimum in-stream flows, and work with water users and tribes in the area on developing actions or activities to help keep water in the streams and protect the Hitch. So when it comes to the Water Board's authority, we're more focused on water quantity and water use, water diversions or extractions. The minimum in-stream flows is really going to be covered by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. However, data collected in our study and data collected in their study, I think, are going to support each other. So because of this executive order, we were able to propose what's called an emergency regulation. And this was adopted on December 6th, so just a couple of weeks ago, by our board. And so in this emergency regulation, it acknowledges that we don't have a good understanding of groundwater and surface water interconnectivity, and that is a data gap. And through the emergency regulation, we are able to issue information orders to groundwater users, surface water users throughout the watershed to obtain higher quality information or more information on water use in the basin. So this is the purview of the emergency regulation here on the map. The shaded area is where we have authority to issue information order. And I'm going to go into a lot of this in a bit more detail here in future slides, but this is the area where the emergency regulation applies to. This is the area where we can issue an information order to. And as I mentioned, the purpose of the emergency regulation is to gather more information on water use in the watershed, try to identify how much groundwater pumping has an impact on surface water flows, try to look at surface diversions, make sure that all surface diversions are in our system and our permitting authority, or bring them into our permitting authority if necessary, all with the end goal of better protecting the Hitch specifically and its spawning and rearing habitats. So now to go into a little bit more detail, and then this is kind of a layout of the next few slides here, but emergency regulations, that was passed December 6th. So we're now in the information order phase. And I have another slide here on information order asked, but a big picture, we're going to issue an information order. Information order will have a response deadline of maybe 30 or 60 days or so. That's still to be determined. And it is a required response if you get an information order, so you will need to respond to it by a deadline. If you don't, that's where we would come in with compliance and enforcement, which is where my unit will probably be involved. And then on the emergency regulation itself, it has an expiration date, so it's only good for a year. So we only have authority under the emergency regulation between now, basically, and December next year. The emergency regulation also has a component for alternative reporting. So different ways to comply with the emergency regulation than a standard answer questionnaire. However, we have been asked, or I guess cautioned by our board to, if we do pursue any or allow any alternative reporting mechanisms, they need to be transparent and enhance, not obscure data. So the information order, it's going to go out. We're still developing who it's going to be sent to, but I can say, so if we look at Big Valley specifically, of course, the largest water user is agriculture. So we can expect that agriculture users will likely be a big target of the information order. However, we are looking at all water users. So we're also looking at domestic well users, commercial operations, industrial operations, possibly municipal operations. Fortunately, on the municipal side, we already have access to a lot of that data through our division of drinking water. So that might already be readily available data. But we are looking at anybody who extracts groundwater or surface water is potentially open to receiving an information order to submit information on their water use. So things we're going to ask in this order are things like your groundwater well location and any construction information like depth that you have in that groundwater well. We're probably going to ask how the water is used, where it's being used, when you're pumping or when you're extracting. We're going to ask volumes, approximate volumes or exact volumes on volumes of water that's being applied and used. For surface water, we're going to ask for basis of water rights. We can kind of compare that to our water rights system that we already have. And then basic information on the property and other to be determined information. So orders will be sent through the mail. So I guess an ask for the group here is to start getting the word out that people might be getting orders. We'll have resources and assistance for anybody who has any questions once those orders go out. But those we're expecting to go out sometime in January. And they would go in a letter, and the letter would explain the information needed, and it would include reporting deadlines. It would also include a link to an online portal where there will be a questionnaire for you to fill out, answer, and submit. And probably mostly from my team or my section, the enforcement section will be available to assist with any compliance questions or any general questions. And we'll also be following up with entities who are not responding to the information order, which does come with a financial penalty if it's not responded to. And then once that information comes in, it's probably going to be quite a bit of work to deal with all that information. But the main goal as of now is to support our groundwater surface water interaction study. So we've actually hired a third-party consultant to better analyze that data for us, predict models, also conduct field tests and kind of ground truth it with actual in the field results. So better understand groundwater surface water interaction, help us make decisions moving forward. We could also use this to, see if other questions come up. If we need to issue other information orders, we'll see where the data takes us. But of course, the end goal is that we can hopefully identify, collaborative or voluntary solutions to better protect the hitch and plan projects, water storage needs, water use needs moving forward. So I guess timeline, this is kind of a before and after. The emergency regulations is complete. That went through a public noticing period through September, October. Public comments were received. Information order, the EREG emergency regulation were modified a little bit. That was adopted by our board on December 6th. Currently, it's with the Office of Administrative Law. So it's usually about a 2-week process. So we expect it to be effective really any day now. So moving forward, as of now, mid-January, late January, we're hoping to issue an information order, currently in the phase of developing and fine-tuning our questions that will be in the information order. To coincide with that, we are planning to host some workshops or seminars to better explain the information order needs, how to comply, and address any questions or concerns from the recipients. So for example, on January 9th, we have a presentation planned. It's a joint Farm Bureau Robinson Rancheria event. I think location to be determined. And then we're also looking at some workshops in person the week of February 12th. And there'll probably also be some online Zoom type webinars throughout the reporting period. So I guess since this is the GSP committee, if there's, I guess, an ask for you is if there are any other groups, people, entities that you would like us to reach out to give a presentation or answer any questions on our emergency regulation or information order, please let us know. We're happy to present or discuss any questions or concerns that people might have, or present overall information on the project. We've been receiving well monitoring data from the county, the monitoring program that we just saw in the previous item. I think we're going to continue requesting that from the county to better evaluate groundwater levels over time, especially to look at things like differences between dry years and wet years. I think a lot of the information we're going to collect will possibly support the GSP effort, especially as it goes through its renewal or update cycles, specifically related to groundwater surface water interactions. So I think there'll be some good collaborative opportunities there. And any other data resources you know of or we know of, we're happy to collaborate on that. And with your network of the GSP, we are looking for aquifer testing wells. So basically a test where you pump a well and you have surrounding groundwater monitoring wells or surface water gauges that can examine how impacts from pumping impact groundwater levels. So I know, I think I saw Scott on this call. We tried with one of the municipal districts, but it won't be feasible there. So we are still looking for anybody with a well with a pump in it that might be open to conducting an aquifer test at their well. We're still looking for that. And that'll also be one of the potential alternative compliance mechanisms, is to allow access to wells for things like this. So more information, if you just Google State Water Board Clear Lake Hitch, or look at the website here. This is where we're posting updates and information. There's also an email listserv you can sign up with to get any notifications that go out. There'll probably be quite a few notifications over the next 1 to 3 months. And we have an email address there where you can contact me. And I think with that, that's a very high level overview of in 15 minutes of the EREG and information order. So I'll pause for any questions. Sarah, I see your hand up.
Hi, John, you mentioned the alternative compliance options, and just I've heard a bit about this, but we have a number of wells that are in the Big Valley area that have sonic water level indicators that are part of a Big Valley Rancheria groundwaters project. And I'm wondering if folks who are part of that would potentially be able to use that information as being in compliance with this, or how you see. And and then the county also has wells, although it sounds like a lot of them are just once a month and they aren't on those type of data loggers. But just wondering kind of how you're looking at alternative compliance.
Yeah, so if people are willing to give us continuous groundwater level measurements and data, that will probably be one way to comply with the information order, because we would find that data more valuable than what's going into a questionnaire, because it's empirical data. So yes, if you have people already in your network or in your monitoring program, we're happy to reach out to them and possibly provide that as a compliance mechanism for the information order for sure. If you have well owners who are willing to have us install equipment like sonic water level indicators, that's another possible way of complying with the information order, by letting us or even the county or any of the tribes to install devices on their wells. So we are looking at that as another way to alternatively comply with the information order.
Are there additional questions for John? And I know the water board, as John stated, they're working on some public meetings. I know we have some going before the board early January, so keep an eye out for that. And then some also in-person workshops in February as well. I know I've been working with the water board team to get some of those dates scheduled. But as John mentioned, if there's any other groups or opportunities for the water board to present at or reach out to, please go ahead and pass along that information to John. If you can't get a hold of John, which I believe everyone should have his contact information, I see him typing, so hopefully he's putting his email in there. You can always reach out to us at Water Resources. There we go. And we'll make sure that folks get that. So any questions, comments for John before we switch gears here?
Can we get a copy of that presentation?
Sure thing. Yep. I think I sent that to you, Marina, for distribution.
Yep, and then we'll go ahead and put that in the presentation. We'll compile the PDF from the slides from today with our meeting and then your update. So
That's good.
Val, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, I'm not sure how much this affects this presentation, but the Land Trust has just closed escrow on the Keithley property that has, I meant to tell Sarah about this first, so Sarah, you know. And the Manning Creek runs through it, and we'll be rehabilitating Manning Creek, the wetlands. So I don't know if that's of interest to you or not, or if you want to monitor the groundwater as we rehabilitate the wetlands near Manning Creek. Just throwing that out there.
Great, thank you, Val. Anything else? Sarah, go ahead.
I actually, since Val mentioned that, I'm just wondering, Val, do you guys have a well near that, or would you want to install a well near it? Because we actually have funding to install 2 shallow monitoring wells.
We'll be talking to you. So this I meant to let you know first, and we will be rehabilitating that with the tribes, with an MOU. So I think that would be a smart idea, to be honest.
Any other questions or comments for John? And John, we will work with you, hopes that we can just have a standing item, whether it be a quick update, either in writing or a presentation at our standing GSPAC meetings.
Sure thing.
Great. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, John, so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. All right, so we are moving on to agenda item 5, Groundwater Sustainability Plan Advisory Committee business. And Val, I see your hand is still raised. Is that from the previous item? Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so item 5.1, Big Valley GSPAC Charter Overview and Next Steps. I'm not going to do a deep dive into the charter now. Folks should be relatively familiar with the charter. If not, and if you need a little refresher, our charter is on the Water Resources website. If you need assistance getting to that actual document, please give us a call or let us know. We can send it to you, but it's under Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan Advisory Committee. You'll see documents, and our most recent charter is there. So as a refresher, our charter basically just outlines what we do as an advisory committee. Again, we're not a voting committee. We're a consensus seeking committee. And we provide guidance recommendation to the Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan, the GSA. So our GSA is the board of directors of the Watershed Protection District, and ultimately they are the governing and voting authority for the Big Valley Basin. But the charter, as we all know, plays a huge role in that. The charter is made up of local interested parties in the basin, the users of the basin, the experts of the basin, as we could say. So the GSA really depends on everyone on this, on our advisory committee, our GSPAC, our awesome acronym that we use to provide recommendation, guidance, etc. We know our GSPAC as it relates to the planning of our GSP. And as we've said, now we're in uncharted territories with the actual implementation of the GSP that was approved by the state. So it's going to look a little bit different as it relates to our roles and expectations. We can still plan to have different subcommittees. I know we had a finance subcommittee for the actual planning of the GSP, technical subcommittee as well. and other subcommittees that the GSPAC can prepare to decide to prepare if necessary. So again, we're not going to decide on that now, but I do know I'm going to talk about a financial subcommittee and then a technical subcommittee later on in today's discussion. So again, our GSPAC, we formally had one in 2021 that the Big Valley GSA adopted the draft charter outlining the roles of the GSA and the GSPAC. And then they also, we made some modifications with the help of our GSPAC, and the GSA then approved our revised charter on February 28th of 2023. So this is more so just to give you all a heads up that in our next meeting, which we have drafted and tentative for end of January of 2024, Mitch will make a note that we're going to have a discussion item on the charter. We're going to look at the charter that was approved in February 28th, 2023. The GSPAC will review that and decide if there's any changes, modifications, et cetera, that we'll need to make to then, if that is the case, then the GSPAC will bring that to the GSA for review and approval in early 2024. Hopefully by then we'll have the assistance of Stantec for facilitation support services. They were a huge asset in preparing our charter the past few times. So hopefully with their guidance and expertise, we'll be able to make this smooth sailing. The great thing is we already have that framework. We didn't make many changes from the 2021 charter to now the 2023 charter adopted. So I just want to give you all a heads up that that is coming down the pipeline. Are there any questions on that right now? You need some fun reading material, feel free to check it out. Go ahead, Sarah.
I am a little bit confused about what you just said. Because so the recharter and kind of the changes, which I don't really have in front of me, but you were saying we can still plan to have different subcommittees. I mean, it just sounded like things were. The main change is that it's no longer to develop a GSP. It's now to participate in the implementation that the GSP has determined is needed based on the review from DWR. Is that correct?
So we already changed the biggest change that we made from the 2021 charter to the 2023 charter was basically just changing it from Sigma or GSP planning to GSP implementation. So our current and valid charter does outline the implementation, but what is outlined in that charter, there's a section where the GSPAC does have the ability to form additional subcommittees and have special meetings if need be. So that's already outlined. So again, if the GSPAC, what I'm bringing this forward is I want to just give the opportunity to the GSPAC that they always have the ability to make changes to the charter. We have that outlined in the approved charter. It's adopted, it's valid, it's still standing. But if the GSPAC, once they look at it after the new year, if they feel that they need to make any changes or modifications to the current charter, then the GSPAC does have that opportunity. But if there are any changes made, I know right now the current GSPAC, it has the vacant seats. So we have the current names of representatives. So for example, Marina de la Llanas, Lake County Watershed Protection District. This is a good transition. I am actually stepping away from Lake County Water Resources. I think folks on this call know, but if we need to make any changes or if we add additional, if we find someone to fill in one of the domestic well owner seats, then we'll need to make that modification to the charter, which currently just says vacant. Did that clarify anything, Sarah?
Yeah, thank you. What's the process for making changes? Is it just, talk to, as the agenda is being made, it gets added to the agenda, or?
Yeah, well, I would say, especially just for the first few meetings in 2024, we just have a standing item of the GSPAC charter. So it has to, of course, since it is a public document outlining a governing body with the GSA, then we do have to have these meetings in a public meeting setting. So we can have it during a GSPAC meeting. The GSPAC can request a special meeting just to specifically cover the charter document. Again, we're a consensus seeking group. So as long as there's consensus with the charter, if the GSPAC works through it, makes any modifications, everyone is for the most part on the same page, then they can bring that to the GSA at a board meeting, right? And the GSA can approve it thereafter. So it has to be in a public format. We can always solicit comments from folks, they can submit those comments to Water Resources, and then a public meeting, we can review those comments all together just to move things efficiently, but that's ultimately going to be up to the GSPAC how we decide. Either way, any comments or recommendations need to be discussed in a public format since we do comply with the Brown Act.
So any one member can add an agenda item to, okay.
Absolutely. Yep. And we do have that opportunity. If you look at on the agenda, we always have a standing item. If there's anything that you do want to add on any GSPAC agenda, even, you know, outside of the charter, if you want to bring a project forward, Sarah, or if Val is working on something and you want to bring a discussion item to the GSPAC, you always have that opportunity. You just need to email water.resources@lakecountyca.gov so we can make sure that we put that on the agenda item or the next GSPAC agenda.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So on that note, I did slide in there. This is actually going to be my last Big Valley GSPAC meeting. My last day with Lake County is January 5th. Bittersweet, absolutely, but it's been really fun to work with you all since the formation of the GSA and the GSPAC. But I did accept a position with Stantec Consulting. So I'll be relocating to Sacramento, and Mitchell Breedlove, who is in the Zoom room, right, or in the conference room, will be taking over as the Lake County Watershed Protection District lead for all things Big Valley GSA. So I will be here until January, bittersweet, but I appreciate the work that you've all done. So I just wanted to make that comment here during this agenda item. Are there any questions on agenda item 5.1?
Oh, who's taking your place again? Sorry.
Mitchell Breedlove. He's waving his hand right now in conference room C.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Good luck, by the way.
Thank you, Val. Appreciate it. All right. So moving on to item 5.2. Again, we're not going to dive deep into this. I know we've had this conversation plenty of times. Again, Mitchell, we need to have this as an agenda item for the next GSPAC meeting. We being the GSPAC. But again, we do still have vacant seats. We have open seats. And here are the open seats that we have. It hasn't changed. We haven't been able to provide or find an underrepresented user, and the GSPAC, as of end of last year, they did decide to add an additional underrepresented user. So again, with the assistance from Stantec, we are hopeful that we are able to fill the environmental/ecosystem seats, 2 underrepresented user seats, 1 private domestic well owner seat, and then 1 private user seat. So we have the definitions right here. But again, just the charter and the open seats are going to be a big standing item for our next GSPAC meeting in early of 2024. So if you know of anyone, please give any recommendations, invite them to the next GSPAC meeting, email water.resources@lakecountyca.gov. We want those recommendations in writing preferably, so we can have written documentation of those open seats. Any questions, comments, concerns with this?
I put a question in the chat.
All right. No, Sarah. So again, as we handled it last year, folks remember, we would get recommendations, and we didn't consensusly seek recommendations to fill in the seats all at one time. It was more of a funnel type process. So as recommendations came in, we would consider those at the next GSPAC meeting. If we get enough recommendations and it's a while until the next GSPAC meeting, again, the GSPAC can always call special meetings. So no, we don't need to determine by the next GSPAC meeting. We don't need to identify everyone that's going to fill in these seats. We understand it takes time. It's a process. We've been working on filling some of these seats for over a year now. But it's still, I just want to encourage folks to push, get the word out, reach out to us if you have any questions. And we can fill these seats as quickly as possible. But especially as we relate to implementation, you know, we kind of missed the mark there for the planning with some of these seats that we weren't able to fill, but the boots on the ground work is happening now. The bulk of the work is actually happening now. So we want to fill in these seats as quickly as possible. Sarah, go ahead.
You know, one of the things that came up in the early meetings, which were a while back, but what was the eligibility portion of who gets in the seats. So like, for example, I know we were hoping an environmental organization that has done work in the Clear Lake watershed would be eligible for the environmental seat. And that was like shot down by most of the people on the committee because they wanted to see local folks, which is understandable. I mean, but anyway, I am thinking if that, if there's going to be a codification of like requirements that needs to be developed, unless it already is, and in which case, if there's a table like this being shared, there needs to be more information provided about requirements. So anyway, I mean, yeah, I don't want to get into it, but just, some more information about eligibility and then being consistent in the application of those requirements.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Sarah. I think it'd be appropriate for the next meeting, Mitchell, making that as an action item, going into the specifics of what the GSPAC's interests and needs are, especially in filling these open seats. I also think that the GSPAC has, we've seen some new faces and some folks, some familiar faces have gone now. So I think it would be appropriate, especially understanding how difficult it has been for us to fill in these seats. I think all options are on the table. Again, ultimately, it's going to be up to the GSA to formally identify and I don't want to say elect, but formally identify who's going to fill in those vacant seats. But if there's a strong consensus or recommendation from the GSPAC, they're going to take those recommendations and hold them very high as they identify who's going to fill in those seats. So I guess long story short, Sarah, I think that if you have someone that you want to advocate for, definitely bring that recommendation forward in writing to us. And then we can wrinkle out in early of 2024 the specifications, get a stronger idea of what the GSPAC, current GSPAC is looking for, some of their requirements and how they want the advisory committee to work. Because again, the great thing about Sigma is it provides us at the local level, the interested parties to roll out Sigma to the best of that works best for our basin. DWR and the state outlines that they acknowledge they are not the experts in our basin. So really it's up to our advisory committee at the leading the charge, and then the GSA as the governing body to decide what is best for our basin, including who makes up the advisory committee, right, of the experts. All right, any other questions as it relates to agenda item 5.2, discussion on GSPAC seats? So not to assign homework, but between now and the next GSPAC meeting, just familiarize yourself with the charter. Think of any questions, comments that you may have, and bring those ready so we can have a productive conversation in early 2024 as it relates to filling in those seats, advocating for folks, providing recommendations, what your specific goals are, and just keep in mind, as especially on who you're representing. So what your organization is and who on the GSPAC are you representing, what user group are you representing, and what would be best for that user group. All right. Okay, moving upward and onward, we are going to shuffle on over. This is just, again, side set of agenda item 5.2. I won't go into that. Here's just some more specifics from Water Code 10723.2. And then same with this is just all from the information that we've collected over time as it relates to the open seat. So again, you will see the process that we have drafted right now, and this will all be shared, uploaded in the minutes as well. So again, just between now and then, the 2024 meeting or one of our first ones, we'll dive deeper into this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Mitchell for agenda item 5.3 regarding request letter from GSA to DWR for an aquifer test in the basin.
All right, as Marina mentioned, this item agenda is talking about a request letter for an aquifer test within our Big Valley GSP area, our basin, and we just wanted to bring this to the GSPAC so that we can start initial conversations. This letter has not been drafted yet, but we are planning to draft a letter that the GSA will submit to DWR, who can assist us. And that would be Quinn Little, would be the main person for assistance on the aquifer test. And John had mentioned previously about what that would involve, and that would assist us in understanding groundwater and surface water interaction within our Big Valley Basin. And so the process of this is that we as the GSA would draft a letter, it would be approved by our GSA chair, and then we'd submit that to DWR. DWR would process that and either accept or deny, but Quinn's hopefully accept it, and they would assist us in performing that. And so we'd be able to begin our outreach and finding a proper well to perform that, and the parameters will be up to DWR, whether that's 1 week at 500 gallons per minute, so on and so forth. That would be up to determination from DWR. But we just wanted to bring this to your guys' attention and get a consensus of support from you all on writing this draft letter. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. And John also knows quite a bit about aquifer tests, as well as Quinn, so they may be able to answer any questions you may have.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I'm wondering about the what it means to be doing that on just one well that's near one creek, you know, as opposed to there's a lot of wells, or there's a lot of creeks in the Big Valley area. And so how you would evaluate, you know, how one test would, you know, how helpful that would be. And it would be really cool to actually have multiple aquifer tests, you know, along every creek. I don't know, just wondering about that and why just one.
No, absolutely. I didn't mean to say just one. That would be up to the determination and funding sources from DWR, whether we can perform one or multiple. I also would love to see throughout different areas, because as you see in our groundwater levels, certain areas have different depths than others. So it'd be great to have an overall understanding of the area. Yeah, so thanks for bringing that to our attention, Sarah, and I agree with you.
I can try and add to that if that's okay. So I know we do have a fair amount. So one hope of the information order is that we'll get well construction information. That well construction information will have information on types of soils. So there'll be like a soil classification symbol for different encountered horizons in the subsurface. So the plan is that a lot of that work's already been done. It's been done with the GSP model. And so if we have an aquifer test that, you know, from a well that's screened in one interval, we can kind of extrapolate that throughout the basin based on models and cross sections and extrapolations of zones or hydrostratigraphic zones. So the more the better, Sarah, but at this point, one is still better than nothing. Fortunately, I think a lot of the Big Valley area, at least north of the highway there, is pretty similar, pretty homogeneous. It gets a little funky south of the highway there, the Big Valley Fault. But hopefully, you know, I forgot the highway number there. I'm sorry, that goes through the Big Valley. If we can get anything north of there, that would be really great. That's where a lot of the ag is and where a lot of the groundwater pumping is. So hopefully, you know, aquifer tests in conjunction with well logs and soil information or geology information, that'll help us kind of extrapolate across the basin.
I would also like to add that the reason that we would like to get support from the GSA submitting this aquifer test is then it would be the GSA that is holding and performing this aquifer test with DWR, and that can assist us with our GSP implementation. Outside, of course, we would be able to get that information from the State Water Board if they were the ones to perform that. But I think that it would look really great for our GSP implementation if it is our GSA that's performing this test with DWR's assistance.
Yeah, and that was DWR's request as well. If there is any aquifer tests that occur in the Big Valley Basin, they would prefer to be involved in kind of taking charge of that, which is fine with us. I will say, if DWR, one thing DWR did tell us, we had a meeting with them about this a couple months ago. If we do get a candidate for an aquifer test in the Big Valley region, they believe they would need to take it to this advisory committee for approval or consideration. So that might be one needed step if we identify any wells.
Absolutely, and you can send all of that request to our water resources, water.resources, and I can take the lead on make sure that gets on the agenda if that is something that needs to be done. Marina would be able to answer that question though.
I have nothing else to add to that, Mitchell. Are there any questions, any other questions for Mitchell, John, or Quinn as it relates to the aquifer test? Right now, as Mitchell said, we're drafting up a request letter for said aquifer test. So we're looking at the advisory committee to one, either bring this item back around in early January if you guys need more information, or two, if you feel comfortable with water resources staff, or if there's any volunteers from the advisory committee to help draft up a letter and bringing that back to the GSPAC for review and approval to bring it to the GSA to then submit to DWR. So either or, I guess I'm looking for any input on if there's a preference. Let me see. All right, Sarah is interested in being more involved with this, so Mitchell, please add her on any correspondence moving forward. Is anyone on the advisory committee interested in making a motion to have staff and Sarah and whoever else on the advisory committee interested in drafting up a letter to bring to the GSPAC in early 2024, a draft letter of support? Sarah?
Yes, I'd like to make that motion.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And
I'll second that.
awesome, thank you, Rebecca. All right, Sarah, so just keep an eye out from an email from Mitchell in the near future to help work on that letter, and of course, just remain involved in that conversation moving forward. Right, so we'll have that as an item for them to choose. Awesome. Moving on. So again, here we have again, you've remember this from the last meeting, but I know it has been a while, so I just want to do a little refresher on Big Valley well application GSPAC review process. So we've not have received any additional new well applications in the Big Valley Basin, but we are currently working with environmental health. We'll be working with them closely to review some of these well applications and have the GSPACs review and approval. So again, new well applications will be sent from environmental health to the Lake County Watershed Protection District. It is the intent of the district to onboard a third-party consultant to review the application of a hydrology report from said new well application process and provide any comments. The district will then send the hydrology reports and application to the GSPAC for review and public comment. And then the district will collect any comments from the GSPAC to then submit to the GSA for a well application review. And then ultimately it will be up to the GSA to whether or not they approve that new well application. This picture on the right-hand side, I just want to note that is not a new well. That is from a well that I pictured a few years ago around the basin, and it was just a pretty picture. So I just want to make that note that it is not a new well that was constructed, obviously, but just for visual purposes. So that is the draft process right now. Again, this will be brought up during the one of the first 2024 meetings, but that's the process that we have now. And just another note on that, we do not currently have a consultant, but of course the county follows all purchasing procedures and policies. So we're trying to identify funds right now to onboard that consultant. But I know that other county departments such as CDD, environmental health, also use hydrologists. So we're hopeful that we can do some sort of tandem agreement, contract, et cetera, that we can pull from that expertise as well, since we don't have a hydrologist on any of our county staffs. Are there any questions or comments with this process? So we're still wrinkling it out, but this is the process that we anticipate to follow. And if there's any questions or concerns from the GSPAC, you don't have those now, but if something comes up, please email us because we do want to capture that as we formalize this process moving forward. Go ahead, Sarah.
Can you clarify what's been done since the, in this last year or so, since it was a requirement to have a the GSA approve any new wells in medium and high priority basins
Yeah, so
since that's being finalized. So what has it been?
yeah, so from my understanding, there have not been any new well applications submitted or approved by environmental health. We are in coordination with their team. So again, we're strengthening our relationship with them and ensuring that those well applications, if new ones are submitted, are then sent to our department. And that way we can funnel it through the GSA as we do serve as the lead for the advisory committee. So environmental health is well aware of the role of Sigma, how it works in the Big Valley Basin, and then seeking the advisory committee's expertise.
So there's been no new well permits or wells approved by EH in the Big Valley Basin since the drought requirements of the governor?
Yes, from my understanding, there was another well, and I believe, I can't remember the actual APN. I can get that and send that to the advisory committee. There was a well that was, that did go to the GSA for review. This was prior to us finalizing the format of, this entire thing, but it wasn't actually a new well application. It was an emergency well. So if one of the wells did go out, they're not operating it as a new well. It's only if one of their older wells does go out, then they will operate that. And it was the same size, and I believe it did pump the same amount of water as the well that is currently in use. So it's not a new additional well. I can send that information to the advisory committee, and I can't remember how many months ago. It was a while back, actually. But that well did go before the board, but it wasn't identified as a new well per the GSA. So it is not currently in use.
And Marina, one more question.
You're
Sorry.
good.
Can you clarify what new well applications means? So if this is a like drilling a well deeper, is that considered a new well application, or what? How is it defined?
Yeah, so yeah, and anyone on this call, and I don't know if DWR can highlight a little bit more than what I can. But basically, again, if they're just maximizing their water use from what they're currently pumping. And again, what I would like to do is just strengthen any of those applications that do come in our Big Valley Basin. I would still like to see those anyhow from environmental health. So we can all be sure to, everyone be on the same page, the advisory committee, the GSA, us at the Water Resources Department and environmental health can determine whether that is a new well. But anything that is being drilled or developed, and then anything that is going to maximize the water pumping on that specific parcel. And we can break this down. This would be appropriate, Mitchell, to break down during the next GSPAC meeting of the specifications of what a new well is, and then that process that we'll be working with environmental health on. Any questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, I just want to do a quick check-in. It is 3:15. We have a few items left. Do we want to do a 3-minute bio break, or how are folks feeling? Do we want to keep rocking and rolling? I hear no's.
I could use a break.
Okay, let's go ahead and do a 3-minute break. We will land here at 3:18. So go ahead and take a break. And then when the GSPAC members come in, if you don't mind just putting on your screen real quick so I can make sure everyone is back. All right, it is 3:18 on the dot. I see people popping on, Val's back as well. Sarah's back. Hi, Sarah. And Scott is hopefully back as well. All right, we'll go ahead and keep pushing through. So we're going to start on agenda item 6, Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan updates and next steps. All right, so our favorite topic that we love to talk about, funding. How are we going to fund the implementation? As a reminder, we were able to identify and secure funds from DWR for the planning of our GSP. Unfortunately, we were not selected for funding of implementation of our GSP. So that leaves us with nothing to work with as it relates to the actual funding mechanism. As we know, Sigma provides the framework to help local agencies ensure sustainability for long-term of our priority basins. But Sigma also entrusts that these local agencies can ensure and prepare and authorize fee authorities to work with our communities to develop and implement GSP. So Sigma provides us the framework, but they also expect, yeah, I'm sorry too, Sarah. It's unfortunate, but we still have a task at hand, and that is to actually implement everything that is in the GSP. So now the biggest priority for this GSPAC is going to be to identify and secure funding sources. So we know that even though we were not awarded, there's going to be very little funding opportunities moving forward for the actual implementation of our GSP. And it is still the intent of the GSA to ensure that the cost of GSP implementation is as less burdensome as possible on our basin users. So here, again, I'm not going to dive too deep into detail, but I have an example that I borrowed from Santa Cruz Mid-County GSA, specifically in their GSP, Appendix 5.A. And this is based off of what the water code allows GSAs to actually implement, specifically water code sections 10730 and 10730.2. So we can basically authorize, the GSA can authorize a fee schedule, a fee assessment, et cetera. There's different opportunities and options that we can pursue. And it's going to be at the recommendation of the GSPAC to bring forward to the GSA that will then ultimately authorize whichever funding mechanism that we decide to do. So just to note, more than one funding mechanism can be used for GSP implementation, often referred to as a hybrid option, and a GSA may decide to fund operations and maintenance through a regulatory fee and projects through a property fees and supplemented by grants. So even though we were not awarded this current grant opportunity from the Sigma team for GSP implementation, our team is still actively seeking out grant opportunities. If you or your team is working on any grant opportunities that will highlight and leverage the work for our GSP implementation, please let us know. We want to try and pursue as many grants as possible, again, to therefore lower the cost as much as possible to our basin users. So based off of the water codes that give our GSA the authority to actually implement funding mechanisms, GSAs may levy taxes and fees. The funding mechanisms available to GSA depend on the powers granted to that GSA by the law. So our GSA should consult with our legal counsel, which our GSA will ultimately do, to confirm which funding mechanism we decide to pursue here for our Big Valley Basin. Some of these options, again, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are basically the main funding mechanisms that a lot of the GSAs around the state have actually deployed. The good thing is we can look at some of our higher priority basins that are actually well further than us in the GSP implementation process. They've done a lot of these, and some of our folks around the state that are in medium priority basins have actually implemented funding mechanisms as well. So we can look at some of these case studies. Like I said, I adopted this from the Santa Cruz Mid-County GSA. Again, just looking at some options and boots on the ground in real life experiences that some of our fellow GSAs around the state that are doing. I know that DWR is working on a guidance document for identifying and implementing funding mechanisms. So our staff, once that is prepared and presented, we will bring that to the GSA Advisory Committee to look at. And then of course our GSA will look at that too. So some of the funding options, again, not the exhaustive list that the GSA can pursue, is existing funding sources, again, which we don't have any currently. They can adopt a regulatory fee, a property related fee, benefit assessment, and special taxes. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. I'm not going to outline which one we have decided because we haven't decided yet. On that note, as it relates to next steps for funding, our Watershed Protection District is in the very early stages of onboarding a third-party consultant to prepare a long-term funding mechanism for GSP implementation. We're seeking a finance subcommittee or anyone on the current GSPAC who's interested in seeking and assisting with that. Of course, as the county, we follow our purchasing code. So this is going to be a very transparent process. We're going to go through an RFQ, RFP process, most likely. And then that ultimately, that contract will be presented to the GSA for approval to onboard an expert consultant, since we don't have the capacity in-house to do this feasibility study. The GSP will then prepare a GSP implementation finance, like I said, subcommittee alongside the selected consultant. And then the overall goal is to identify and roll out a fee schedule by July of 2024. This is a very quick timeline, but it is very doable, especially once we identify a consultant who will be taking the charge on this, but leaning on the GSPAC for your expert input as well as it relates to rolling out a potential fee study. So the feasibility study is going to look at these different options that we have here, talk to our legal team, talk to our GSPAC, talk to our GSA, talk to the Basin, and see what is going to be the best appropriate route for us and the most fiscally responsible route to actually implement the GSP. Once that is taken care of, once we do identify as a group, the fee schedule the funding mechanism or mechanisms that we decide to pursue, then the GSA can then implement that. The reason why we highlighted July 2024 as the ideal goal to roll this out is because if we do have to put anything on the taxes or reach out to assessors or do a fee assessment, then that falls in the appropriate timeline. So again, I just wanted to put this as an item that is going to be a standing and priority item moving forward for the GSA and the GSPAC to consider. But with that being said, are there any specific questions or comments on this? If you're interested in serving in a subcommittee capacity or involved in conversations, please let us know and we can make sure that you're on any future correspondence moving forward. Any questions or comments right now? All right, we'll go ahead and move forward with, oh, go ahead, Sarah.
So if there's I see the goal on screen, fee schedule rollout by July 2024, which is, yeah, just right around the corner. Is that going to be just so I understand, that's going to be identified by this consultant and any GSPAC recommendations? And does that mean that are we going to have additional meetings to do that, or is that going to be when how the timing of this, how is that going to happen?
Yeah, if you recall, Sarah, during the GSP planning, we had our standing GSPAC meetings, but then we had additional subcommittee meetings that met, however many times they needed to. So yeah, I would envision that additional meetings would be taking place. Nothing is going to be, the feasibility study is just going to look at all these possible options. Based off of those, there's going to be recommendations brought to the GSA that ultimately is going to be the one to decide which mechanism the GSPAC and the GSA rolls out. So even if you can't participate in meetings, if you have input, the GSPAC will review all the documents. They'll review the feasibility study. They'll be in conversations with the consultants similar to the GSP development. Those consultants are going to work closely with us at the local level, the GSPAC, to bring these ideas, updates, proposed next steps forward. So again, it's going to be very transparent. we acknowledge it's a quick timeline, but, you know, even though our GSA is approved, if we don't actually implement, sorry, if we do acknowledge that even though our GSP is approved, if we don't implement this, then of course we do run the risk of losing local control of the basin. And I see Rebecca would like to be included in all additional meetings regarding the fee structure. You got it, Rebecca. Did that answer your question, Sarah?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? So even if you're not on a subcommittee or you don't have the capacity to participate in the finance subcommittee, you will still all be kept in the loop of the work that's going on. And I know the consultants, it is our intent to have those consultants reach out to the GSPAC. We haven't selected a consultant yet, but again, we're in the early stages of doing that and hoping getting something lined up by the end of January. All right, moving on. So Big Valley GSP reporting timeline. So again, this is also taken from the last meeting that we had. We know that Sigma requires us to provide and prepare annual reports. So we do have an annual report that is to be submitted April 1st of 2024. Our current annual report from water year 2022 is on our Big Valley GSP website, on the Water Resources website. So again, following that template and just again updating the data. So again, we have these annual reports, and then we have a 5-year report that's due April 1st, 2027. So again, this fee schedule is going to identify how much it is roughly going to cost us to prepare these annual reports, because it does cost us money. As a reminder, last year's annual report cost us a little under $25,000 to prepare. We were able to identify funding for that. So just keep in mind that that is an annual expense. And then on top of that, you have the 5-year report, which does require more information, further analysis, that is going to cost more. So again, this is what these fee schedules are going to pay for. This is what this is why the GSA has to enlist a fee in the basin to ensure that we can implement the GSP, and part of the implementation and requirement of Sigma is these annual reports. So again, we are planning on doing the same thing that we did last time. We had a help of a consultant through the purchasing policy to prepare this annual report, and then our staff also assisted in that to try and keep the cost as low as possible. So that is still the plan. We're again planning on onboarding a consultant to help with that work. We don't have the capacity or resources to do that in-house. But we do have funding to do that, to roll that out this year, which is great because that's one thing that we can cross off our list. We did budget for that last year. That was approved by the board this coming year. So we have funds secured for this year, but again, moving forward, we're going to have to find and secure funds for that through an internal fee schedule. So here's the reporting timeline. Again, we have additional reports that need to be done, and then all the way through our achievement of sustainability, which will be by April 1st, 2042. If you have specific questions on what is required in an annual report, there is a lot of great information on the DWR Sigma website. I have a link right here on what is required in an annual report, when it is due, how it is submitted. Again, and we have that final annual report, which is public information on our Water Resources website. Any questions on the annual report?
I just have one. Will it cost more to do the reports after the first one, or does the first one give you sort of a boilerplate to follow and maybe cost less after that?
I wish that was the case, Val. I can't say off the top of my head. I don't see the costs getting any less. I mean, yes, it's a great boiler point, but you also have to look at, you're just building off on additional data. And especially as we expand our monitoring network, we have to follow requirements. We have more data to look at. It's just adding on top of it. So yeah, it creates that framework for us, but it's still data analysis. We're still looking at the model that we have. We're still updating the model. So it doesn't mean that the cost is going to be any less. We still expect, and looking off of what GSAs are spending now throughout the state, I've been doing a lot of research on roughly how much this GSA is sending on annual reports. It's all roughly about the same. So we can expect it to be around the $25,000 mark if we do a consultant. And then if there is any data that anyone is collecting that wants to, you want to submit that data once we do onboard a consultant, please share that with us. Hopefully with the IO, we'll be able to strengthen the data that we have collected, enhance that to put into this coming annual report. So I know, Sarah, you and your team are doing great work out there. If you guys have any data that you want to share, once we onboard a consultant, they'll definitely reach out to the GSPAC to collect any data. Same with Rebecca, you and your team, if there's any data that you all want to share. We want to ensure that we are collecting the best available data. That's the intent of the GSPAC. Val, I kind of went on a tangent at the end of that, but did that answer your question?
Okay, I just sort of wondered if there's a general idea, and we may have discussed this earlier, of what the annual cost would be and how, and then you can figure out how to divvy it out, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what the funding mechanism feasibility report is going to do. It's going to look at the annual reports for, the next 5 years, along with the 5-year annual report, additional reporting that we have to do. It's going to look at administrative costs. It's going to look at everything, and it's going to break it down into giving the GSPAC and the GSA a better idea of how much is actually going to cost to implement our GSP. We have draft and rough estimates in the approved GSP. We did have that finance committee that looked at those draft analysis, but if things has changed, time has gone on, we have a stronger idea of how much things are going to cost. You also have projects that we hope to get funded too. That's what the entire feasibility report is going to do, is look at that specific cost breakdown for our GSA, so we can have an idea of how much we plan to spend in fiscal year 23, 24, 24, 25, 26, so things along those lines. So that's what the feasibility report is going to do for us.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the elephant of the room, which is funding? All right, seeing none. We are now on agenda item 7, public comment. Are there any public comments that wish to be shared? We'll go ahead and start in conference room. Mitch, are there any public comments?
No public comments here.
No? Okay. Are there any public comments made, wishing to be made in the Zoom room? Seeing none, I don't see any in the chat as well, and we did not receive any via email. All right. All right, so we are going to move to item 8, which is future GSPAC meeting date. I'm going to go actually. So right now we have it tentative January 26th of 2024. And if we look at item 2, this is a mistake. Don't look at 2.1. It's item 2. Discussion and determination on 2024 GSPAC schedule. So I'm looking for any input or comments from the GSPAC. Again, knowing that we have a lot of work to go. It's been a while since we've met. We're in the implementation stage. We need to determine a fee implementation in our basin. We're working on annual reports. There's a lot of work that are going on. I'm recommending that the GSPAC moves forward on every other month instead of on a quarterly basis for meetings, still holding the 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., the usual time frame that we met via hybrid option. If that's something that is of interest to the GSPAC, then that would make our meeting schedule January 26th, March 22nd, May 24th, July 26th, September 27th, and November 22nd. I also would like to note that I did not look at any of the holidays for next year. So that's something that Mitchell, we would need to look at just to make sure that those dates still work. But again, if that is the case, I'm looking for consensus from the GSPAC of interest or not interest to meet on a bi-monthly basis, or the committee can decide to stick to a quarterly basis. Whether we decide to do a quarterly basis or a bi-monthly basis, the GSPAC, of course, always has the opportunity to call a special meeting following the Brown Act. That just needs to be noticed 24 hours in advance. But of course, the sooner you advertise that, the better chance it is that we get more community input. So I'm looking for any comments or concerns regarding a proposed bi-monthly meeting schedule.
I think my only comment, this is Val, would be we discussed having these meetings at a time when people who work could come. I don't know if we're still discussing that or not. So I think a weekday at 11 or 11:30 is hard for working people. That's all.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Val, and that's something that the GSPAC can, you know, in the first meeting in January, we can look at, talk a little bit more about the specific times. I think it would be great to maybe not just have a standing time, we can have a standing time, but maybe we can move things around. So every other meeting, you know, we can meet 11 to 1, you know, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then the next meeting might be 5 to 7 p.m., you know, things of those nature. So we do have that flexibility. And I know we did talk about that because there is concern that not everyone has time to take throughout their day and during the middle of their day to have these meetings. And then Sarah, I do see your comment, bi-monthly might allow us to get more done, and the July meeting looks like it falls within the Thule Boat Festival. So Mitchell, please make a note about the July meeting. We may need to change that, which is totally fine. And I agree, Sarah, that's what was one of our intents, whereas meeting on a bi-monthly basis will get us back into the swing of things and be more productive. Are there any other questions or comments? Does anyone not agree or supportive of a bi-monthly meeting schedule? If hearing nothing, I'm looking for consensus. What we could do is let's see consensus on a bi-monthly GSPAC meeting schedule. And then the January 26th meeting, we can bring a updated schedule and the GSPAC can see consensus on that schedule for the standing 2024 GSPAC schedule.
So do you need a motion?
Yes, motion for bi-monthly GSPAC meetings for 2024.
So moved by Val.
Thank you, Val. Seeking a second.
I'll second.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Yay, glad everyone's supportive of that. All right. So with that being said, it is 3:40 p.m. This was a fun meeting. I'm sad that it is my last in this specific role, but I'm hopeful I'll run into you all again in another capacity. But right now, Mitchell will be taking over as GSPAC lead, but we are hopeful, we would like to keep all correspondence. Please email Mitchell. Mitchell, go ahead, put your email in the chat. We'll make sure it's on the website as well. But ccwater.resources@lakecountyca.gov just to ensure that we collect all comments, items for the GSPAC. And then we can be reached at 707-263-2344. We also have Quinn's contact as well. Quinn is our point contact. He's waving there in the back. We appreciate him driving down from Red Bluff to join us. And he is a great point of contact for us. He's been a huge asset in the DWR department and for us at our local level to reach out to him, any guidance, expertise. Quinn has been great. So his email is quinn.little@water.ca.gov and his phone number is there as well. Please feel free to reach out to Quinn if you have any specific questions and if you don't feel comfortable going through our department. And of course, all of our information is on the Water Resources website. We're actively updating that now. If you are having issues finding something, just give us a call. If you think the website can be laid out better, which I think it could, let us know. We're open to any and all ideas and options, but I appreciate staff's time for making sure that all of these meetings are recorded, minutes are prepared, slides are collected, and everything is as transparent as possible. Any questions or comments before we adjourn the meeting?
Good luck, Sarah.
Thank you. Awesome. Hearing none, we will adjourn the meeting at 3:42 p.m. I appreciate you all, and we'll keep on keeping on. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank
Take
you
care.
all.